"You're done!" the sergeant hissed, his breath sharp, his voice echoing off glass storefronts. Shoppers froze, phones tilted upward. A ripple of whispers surged across the polished tile. She didn't fight. She didn't flinch. Black athletic tee, white shorts, sneakers still clean from the morning run. She could have been anyone. But at that moment, in their eyes, she was only one thing: suspect. "Shoplifters don't walk free here," the officer barked again, louder this time, as if volume could erase doubt. The second officer pulled her arms behind her, cuffs clicking with practiced certainty. Around them, kids clutched their parents' sleeves. Teenagers whispered, "Record this." And one woman's voice cut above the hum, "Where's the evidence? Show us what she stole." No one answered. The young woman's eyes didn't dart for escape, didn't beg for mercy. They locked on the officer's face with a calmness that unsettled. Her chest rose steady, her silence heavier than any scream. For her, this wasn't shock. This was repetition, a script she'd read before. The sergeant leaned close, almost nose to nose, sneering for the crowd's benefit. "You people always think you can talk your way out. Not today." Click. Another phone lit up, another angle captured, another truth documented. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. A woman in the crowd shook her head, voice trembling but firm. "This isn't right. She didn't touch a thing." Still cuffed, still pressed between two uniforms, the young woman finally moved, not with struggle, but with words low enough for only him to hear. "You boys are done." The sergeant smirked, mistaking it for bluff. But the crowd felt something shift. The cuffs weren't the surprise. The silence was. Because she didn't argue, didn't twist away, didn't give them the fight they expected. The young woman stood in the center of the corridor, framed by neon signs and glass storefronts. She wore nothing flashy: black-fitted tee, plain white shorts, sneakers built for miles, not for style. No purse dangling from her arm, no bag to hide contraband, just her phone, locked in her pocket. And still, they called her a thief. To the crowd, she could have been any other shopper, someone who stopped for a coffee, someone waiting for a friend. But to the two officers gripping her arms, she was already guilty. Mall security flagged her. One of them muttered to the sergeant, said she matched the description. Description of what? Of who? The words evaporated into the air, unanswered. A man leaning against the railing pulled out his earbuds. "What did she even take?" he asked. His voice carried. No response came. The truth. There was no missing item, no alarm. Only suspicion stitched together by glances and assumptions. She knew this drill. Years earlier, at 22, she'd been stopped outside a boutique for carrying her own backpack. "Policy," the clerk had said, ignoring her receipt. At 30, it was an airport lounge where her boarding pass was questioned 3 times, while others walked through untouched. And now, in her mid-30s, here again, different uniform, same story. The memory flickered across her face, but only for a second. Then calm again, steel again. Her eyes scanned the polished floor, the gathering circle of strangers, the glow of cameras rising one by one. Each lens aimed at her turned the air heavier. She didn't ask for witnesses, but now she had them. One teenage boy whispered to his friend, "Why is she so calm?" The friend shrugged. "Maybe she knows something they don't." The sergeant yanked her elbow forward, loud enough for the microphones already listening. "Let's not waste time, she's going downtown." The crowd shifted. A woman with a stroller spoke up. "You don't even have evidence, that's harassment." But the sergeant didn't hear or pretended not to, because in his eyes, authority was proof enough. Still cuffed, still silent, the young woman inhaled once, steady. She wasn't powerless, she wasn't voiceless. She was waiting for the right second to remind them who she truly was. The sergeant's grip tightened, his knuckles pale against the metal cuffs. He scanned the crowd, raising his voice like a man staging a performance. "She was spotted near the cosmetics counter," he announced, loud enough to drown out dissent. "Items went missing. We're not letting her walk." The words landed heavy, but thin like smoke without fire. No one had seen her take anything, yet the accusation wrapped around her like chains. The store manager emerged from the sliding doors, suit pressed sharp, tie knotted too tight. He eyed her up and down as if his gaze alone could write a report. "That's her," he declared. "Matches what security described." A murmur rippled through the watchers. A middle-aged man shook his head. Describe what? She's wearing gym clothes like half this floor. But the manager ignored him. He pointed to the officer. You've got the right one. Don't let her play games. The second officer rummaged through her pockets empty except for her phone and a single house key. He held them up like trophies. Suspicious. No wallet, no ID. Who walks around like this? Gasps flickered in the crowd. A teenager whispered, "My dad does," when he jogs. A laugh followed, brittle but real. The sergeant glared, jaw tight. "Step back, everyone. This is police business." But people didn't step back. They leaned in. Phones rose higher, recording faces, words, silence. The woman in cuffs stood motionless, her chin lifted just enough to steady her own storm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. A young mother near the railing spoke, louder than before. If she stole something, show it. Otherwise, let her go. The manager turned, bristling. "Ma'am, please don't interfere. You have no idea what these people try." "These people?" The mother cut him off, her tone a blade. "I heard you." The sergeant's patience snapped. He shoved the young woman forward another step, the clink of cuffs sharp against the mall's polished floor. "You think silence saves you? Think again. We'll get the truth out one way or another." Still, she said nothing. Only her eyes shifted to the lenses capturing every move, every word. The weight of the crowd pressed tighter. Their whispers grew teeth. She didn't even have a bag. Why are they so sure? This is profiling, plain and simple. The sergeant looked around, realizing control was slipping. His volume rose. "Clear the area. This suspect is resisting investigation." But the crowd didn't scatter. They stayed. Some even stepped closer. And in that moment, the air thickened. The officers thought they had dominance. But dominance was cracking, piece by piece, under the eyes of 100 strangers who weren't buying the script. And she? She was still waiting. She could have shouted. She could have begged. She could have twisted free in front of all those cameras. But she didn't. The cuffs bit into her wrists. The sergeant's hand clamped her elbow. The manager's voice hissed like a leaky pipe, but her stillness was louder than all of it. She stood there, breathing slow, as if time itself had to wait on her pulse. "Why isn't she saying anything?" someone muttered near the food court railing. "Because she knows," another answered. Voice hushed but certain. The sergeant tugged at her arm again, irritation crawling across his face. "Speak up, thief. What'd you take? Where'd you hide it?" Silence. The crowd leaned closer. Phones hovered inches higher. Every second she withheld words turned the mall into a theater, the officers into desperate actors. And then, in that quiet, her mind opened to memory. At 25, she'd walked into a jewelry shop after her shift, still in uniform pants, but without her badge. A clerk followed her every step, called security the moment she touched a display case. They asked if she could even afford to be inside. At 28, she bought groceries late at night, and the cashier double-checked her card 3 times, calling a manager to inspect it under the light. People behind her sighed, tapped feet, watched her like a scene, not a customer. It wasn't new. It wasn't rare. It was stitched into her history like scars only she could trace. Now, here again. But this time was different. This time, she held something no one else in this mall could see. The sergeant leaned close, breath hot, tone sharp. "You're making it worse for yourself. Silence won't save you." She turned her head just enough for him to catch her eyes. Calm, unshaken. And in that gaze, something rattled. Not fear, not guilt, but the kind of composure only power can grant. The crowd noticed it first. A woman whispered, "She doesn't look scared." A man filming added, "She looks like she's waiting." The sergeant sneered, shaking his head. "Keep recording," he barked at the bystanders. "You'll all see what happens when justice is served." But in truth, they were already seeing it. His voice cracking, his authority wobbling, his target refusing to play her assigned role. Still cuffed, still silent, she inhaled once more, steady and deliberate. And though the officers thought they had her cornered, the real storm was just beginning one. She wasn't going to stop. The mall had stopped being a mall. It was a courtroom now. Every balcony, a gallery, every phone, a witness. The sergeant barked another order, but the sound fell flat. What cut sharper was the red glow of dozens of recording lights, blinking like judgment in the air. Near the fountain, a teenage boy raised his phone high. His voice cracked with both nerves and defiance. "Hey, I got all of this, every word. You can't delete what the world's about to see." The officer nearest him snapped, "Put that away, kid." "Ugh." But the boy didn't lower it. Instead, he straightened his back as if holding the entire room on his shoulders. Beside him, a woman in her 40s, shopping bag still looped around her wrist, shook her head. Her voice was calm, but steady enough to cut through. "This isn't how you treat people. You don't even have proof." The manager spun toward her, face tight, voice rising. "Ma'am, please, this is police procedure. Don't interfere." She didn't blink. "No, this is harassment. And now you're doing it on camera." Gasps trickled through the crowd. The tension thickened like fog under lights. On the second-floor balcony, a man in a gray hoodie started live streaming. His voice echoed from above. "We're at Midtown Mall, and officers just cuffed a woman with no evidence. Everyone's watching. Everyone's recording. The words spread like fire through the building. Through the comments section he couldn't even see yet, through the fragile hold the officers thought they had. The young woman in cuffs stood at the center of it all, still calm, still waiting. She hadn't spoken since her quiet warning. "You boys are done," but now the witnesses carried her silence like a banner. A younger officer shifted, unease flickering across his features. "Sergeant, maybe we should check the footage before—" The sergeant cut him off. "No, don't second guess. We've got our suspect." But the doubt had already cracked the surface. From the crowd, a college student with a denim backpack called out, "Then show us. Show us the stolen item. Where is it?" The sergeant froze for half a beat too long. It was enough. Enough for the whispers to spike into full voices. "Yeah, show us." "Empty her pockets already." "She doesn't have anything." The officers had wanted silence. Instead, they'd built a choir. The woman in cuffs closed her eyes just once, steadying herself. Because this exact moment was the shift she had been waiting for. Not her voice, not her badge, not yet. The people. And the people were speaking. The chants from the crowd sharpened, echoing off the marble floor like strikes of a drum. "Show us the proof." "She's clean, let her go." The sergeant's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to losing the room. He barked back, louder, trying to drown out the voices. "Everyone step back. This is an official investigation. Interfering makes you complicit." But instead of scattering, the crowd pressed closer. Dozens of lenses pointed, 100 eyes locked on him. The louder he shouted, the weaker he looked. That was when the manager reappeared, pushing through bodies to stand beside the officers. His tie was crooked now, sweat shining at his temple. But his voice carried the arrogance of someone sure of his place. "She doesn't belong here," he snapped. "This mall doesn't need her kind dragging it down." The words fell like a brick through glass. Gasps rippled instantly. Someone cursed under their breath. A woman with her phone raised said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Did he just say her kind?" The manager didn't flinch. He straightened his suit jacket, pretending the phrase hadn't burned the air around him. The younger officer hesitated again, glancing at his sergeant. "Maybe we should—" "Quiet," the sergeant cut him off. "Don't show weakness." He turned back to the crowd, then to the cuffed woman, sneering now as if humiliation could reassert control. "People like you always think you're above the rules. Not today. You're done." Phones caught every syllable. Some even replayed it live for their followers in the growing streams. From the crowd, the teenage boy shouted, voice cracking but clear, "She hasn't done anything. You're just profiling her." "Kid, shut it!" the sergeant barked. But the boy's words stuck, hanging heavy. Profiling. Everyone had thought it. Now it had been named. The manager leaned in, close to her face, venom in his tone. "Look at you dressed like that, wandering around with no ID. You expect us to believe you're innocent?" Still cuffed, still calm, she turned her head just enough to meet his stare. Her silence answered louder than words, and that silence drove him wild. "Say something," he demanded. "Admit what you did." The crowd erupted, voices colliding. "She doesn't have to say a thing. You're exposing yourselves, not her." The sergeant raised his voice again, straining for authority. "She's resisting cooperation. That alone is grounds for removal." But even as he spoke, his eyes flicked toward the cameras. He knew every word was being archived, every move etched into digital memory. The cuffed woman stood unshaken. Her calm was gasoline, and the officers were the ones striking matches against themselves. And in that rising fire of voices, something fundamental had shifted. The mall was no longer under their control. The sergeant's patience cracked like thin ice. He shoved her forward, pressing her shoulder into the glass storefront so hard the pane rattled. Shoppers inside froze mid-purchase, staring through the display like it was a window into injustice. "You want proof?" his voice thundered. "Here's your proof. A thief caught in the act." But there was nothing in her hands, Nothing in her pockets, only the cuffs cutting into her wrists and the reflection of her calm face against the glass. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone shouted, "That's assault!" Another, "You can't just slam her like that." The manager seized the moment, puffing up his chest, spitting venom for the cameras. "She's dangerous. People like her always escalate. That's why we called you." The word dangerous sliced through the air, ugly and deliberate. Phones zoomed in, catching his sneer, his sweat, his certainty. Still, she didn't speak, didn't move. Her stillness was defiance sharper than any protest. The younger officer shifted again, his voice low, uncertain. "Sergeant, maybe this isn't—" "Quiet!" the sergeant barked, snapping his authority like a whip. He grabbed her bagless hip, patted down again, rougher this time, performing for the crowd. Nothing here? Then maybe she ditched it. Criminals always find a way. A collective murmur rolled through the onlookers, no longer whispers but outrage swelling. "She has nothing. You planted this whole story. This is racism live on tape." From the balcony above, the live streamer's voice boomed louder, carried by adrenaline and echo. "Everyone watching online share this. They're calling her guilty with empty hands." The sergeant's face flushed red, fury and fear tangled in his eyes. He turned her sharply, cuffs biting deeper, and spat words meant to wound. "You don't belong here, not in this mall, not in this city, not anywhere decent." The sentence detonated in the air. People gasped, cursed, shouted all at once. A mother covered her child's ears too late. The cuffed woman blinked once. Slow, heavy, her eyes lifted to meet his, unwavering. And for the first time, the sergeant faltered. His breath stuttered. His voice broke, because her silence carried more weight than his uniform ever could. The crowd's voices fused into one roar. "Let her go." The glass behind her vibrated with the force of it. But the sergeant, trapped between pride and panic, doubled down. "Call for backup," he ordered his partner. "If she won't talk, we'll drag her out." The crowd exploded in protest. Phones shot higher. A teenager screamed, "You'll regret this." And in that charged second, with her cheek pressed against cold glass and injustice wrapped around her wrists, she finally drew a breath that wasn't just calm. It was loaded. It was waiting, because the storm had reached its peak, and her answer was coming. Her cheek was still pressed against the glass, the sergeant's grip digging into her shoulder when she finally moved. Not with force, not with panic, with precision. She turned her head just enough to catch the nearest camera phone in full frame. Her voice was low, even every syllable sharpened by control. "Keep recording. Every second." The crowd hushed, drawn in by the sound they'd been waiting for. The sergeant laughed, a harsh, brittle noise. "Oh, so now you want to talk? Too late." But she wasn't speaking to him. With slow, deliberate motion, she shifted her cuffed hands just enough to reach the pocket seam of her shorts. From it, a small device slipped into view, her phone, angled perfectly for voice command. The younger officer stiffened. "Hey, she's got a phone!" "Shut her down!" the sergeant barked. Too late. Her voice cut clean through the chaos. "Call command." The device blinked alive. A second later, a crisp voice answered through the speaker, amplified by the mall's silence. "Command, identify yourself." The sergeant scoffed, yanking her arm. "You think we're impressed by some fake call center?" She didn't flinch. Her reply was calm, cold, deliberate. "Captain Williams, badge number 4217. Off duty, currently detained without cause. Logging incident now." The air collapsed into silence. For a beat, no one moved. Then the crowd erupted gasps, shouts, disbelief colliding in the atrium. "She's a cop?" "She just said, Captain, did you hear that?" "Oh my God, they cuffed an officer." The sergeant froze, grip loosening unconsciously. His partner's face drained pale. Captain? He stammered. The phone crackled again. "Captain Williams, incident confirmed. Multiple witness feeds streaming. Backup en route. Do you require immediate intervention?" Her eyes flicked to the sergeant, steady as steel. "Affirmative. Document everything. Flag both officers for misconduct review." Gasps turned into cheers. Phones tilted higher. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Get him, Captain!" The sergeant's face burned crimson. He tried to regain footing, spitting out, "Don't believe her. She's bluffing, anyone can say." But the younger officer whispered, just loud enough for the cameras to catch, "I've heard that name before. Internal affairs." The crowd surged with noise. Justice had just changed sides, and for the first time, the woman in cuffs allowed herself the faintest shift in posture, shoulders straightening, chin lifting, not defiance, not arrogance, but authority reclaiming its rightful place. She wasn't their suspect anymore. She was their superior. The word captain spread through the mall like a spark hitting dry wood. First disbelief, then realization, then the fire. She's a police captain? No way. Did you hear her badge number? They cuffed their own superior. The crowd's voices swelled, a tidal wave the officers couldn't command. Phones angled closer, catching every tremor in the sergeant's jaw. The younger officer stepped back, uncertainty carved into his face. Sergeant, we can't. His words trailed off, drowned by the echo of one undeniable truth. The woman they'd accused wasn't just innocent. She outranked them. Captain Williams lifted her head fully now, posture regal despite the steel biting her wrists. Her voice carried not with volume, but with weight. You called me a thief in a mall I swore to protect. You profiled me. You cuffed me. And now, the world is watching you answer for it. Gasps turned into cheers, some clapping, some shouting in raw vindication. The manager sputtered, his face flushed, sweat rolling down his temple. Shh! She's lying! This is some stunt! Anybody can— The phone in her pocket cut him off, the clear voice of command reverberating. Captain Williams, your credentials are verified. All audio and video streams are active. Both officers have been flagged for immediate suspension. Do you require them escorted? The sergeant's grip slipped entirely. His hand fell away as if burned. Suspension? He whispered, but the word sounded more like a sentence. The crowd roared. They're suspended. She really is, Captain. Justice right here, right now. Williams turned, slowly, deliberately, facing the sergeant and his partner, with eyes sharp as glass. You cuffed me in public. You humiliated me without evidence. And you thought silence meant submission. She stepped forward, the clink of her chains echoing like a gavel strike. That was your last mistake. The younger officer's face collapsed with shame, but the sergeant stood rigid, pride warring with panic. He barked at the manager for backup. Tell them, you saw— But the manager's words stuck in his throat. Phones were aimed at him like barrels, and he realized there was no defense left. His own phrase, her kind, was already captured, already damning. From the balcony, the live streamer shouted, 20,000 viewers right now! They all know the truth! The sergeant's chest heaved, his authority unraveling strand by strand. He opened his mouth, but no words came. And Captain Williams? She let the silence sit for one beat longer, long enough to brand the moment into every witness's memory. Then, with steady precision, she spoke the words that cut deeper than any shout. I am not your suspect. I am your commanding officer. The mall erupted. Cheers, applause, shouts of vindication exploded like thunder in the atrium. The balance of power had shifted so completely that the officers stood exposed, smaller than the cuffs they'd tried to wield. And for the first time since it began, Captain Williams allowed herself a breath that wasn't patience, wasn't endurance. It was victory, sharp and undeniable. The atrium was no longer a place of shopping and chatter. It was a stage, and every spotlight came from a phone lens. The sergeant stood frozen, his authority stripped bare. His hands twitched at his sides, no longer gripping her, no longer commanding anything. He opened his mouth to speak, but the roar of the crowd smothered him. Apologize. You cuffed a captain? Shame on you. The younger officer stepped back, his lips trembling, eyes darting toward the exits, as if escape might erase the digital evidence flooding live streams across the country. His voice cracked, soft, desperate. Captain, I didn't know. But ignorance was no shield, and the crowd wasn't buying it. A man yelled from the second floor, You knew enough to put the cuffs on, don't act innocent now! And the manager, sweat-soaked and cornered by truth, tried to salvage his position. He lifted his hands, palms out, voice stumbling. This is all a misunderstanding. We thought— Thought what? A woman snapped from the crowd. Her phone was inches from his face. That she didn't belong here? That she was guilty because of how she looks? The manager's throat bobbed. His rehearsed arrogance dissolved into stammers. No, I didn't mean. But the receipts were already written, not on paper but in memory and pixels. His phrase, her kind, hung heavy over him like a noose. The live streamer's voice boomed again from above. 50,000 viewers now. They're hearing every excuse, every lie. The sergeant turned red, his pride collapsing under weight he couldn't bear. He lunged once more toward Captain Williams, pointing a shaking finger. You set us up. You planned this." She didn't flinch. Her reply was ice. "No, you set yourself up. All I did was walk through a mall." The crowd erupted again, some clapping, some jeering at the officers. A teenage girl whispered to her mother, "This feels historic." And for those in uniform, the collapse was complete. The sergeant's authority crumbled. The younger officer's doubt consumed him. The manager's words strangled him in replay. They were no longer accusers. They were the accused. Captain Williams stood in the center, still cuffed, yet more free than any of them. Her silence had flipped into revelation, and the witnesses, hundreds in person, thousands online, were the jury delivering their verdict. One truth had become undeniable. Those who tried to humiliate her had been stripped of power in the very moment they thought they wielded it. And in that collapse, the balance of justice had swung not tomorrow, not in court, but right there on polished tiles under the gaze of the public. The cuffs still clung to her wrists, but authority had already shifted. Captain Williams drew in one steady breath and angled her phone toward her mouth. Her voice was firm, surgical. "Command, log this. Sergeant Daniels and Officer Marks. Misconduct, profiling, unlawful arrest. Suspend both effective immediately." "That," the device chimed, cold and precise. "Confirmed. Suspension order processed. Credentials revoked." A beat later, the sergeant's radio hissed, then went dead in his hand. His badge scanner blinked red, denied. He pressed it again and again, panic spilling across his face. Nothing. The younger officer fumbled with his comm. Same result, access denied. His hands shook as if the machine itself had turned on him. The crowd exploded. "They're locked out. Suspended live right here." "Ugh, this is justice." The manager stumbled back, stammering. Wait, this is a mistake. I didn't mean..." Williams lifted her gaze to him, calm and commanding. "You profiled me. You called me dangerous. You said I didn't belong." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The phones around him made sure they would echo far beyond these walls. She turned her head slightly, addressing command once more. "Add, manager of Midtown Mall, identified as Greg Taylor. Document statement. Her kind doesn't belong here. Flag for civil review and corporate notice." The manager's knees nearly buckled. No, please, I'll lose everything." Her eyes held steady. "You should have thought of that before trying to take mine." The roar of approval from the crowd surged like thunder. Shoppers clapped, some whistled, others raised their phones higher, immortalizing every second. The sergeant's chest heaved. He tried once more to assert himself, but his words came out hollow. You can't do this. You can't strip us like this." Williams stepped closer, the cuffs glinting under the mall lights. Her voice cut like a blade. "I already have. Justice doesn't wait for your permission." The silence that followed was electric. Then a single chant rose from somewhere near the fountain, catching fire as more voices joined. "Justice now, justice now." The officers, once the enforcers, now stood exposed, stripped, powerless, trembling before the very woman they had tried to erase. And Captain Williams, even bound in chains, had just executed judgment without raising her voice, without lifting a hand. The punishment was complete, the reckoning undeniable. The cuffs clicked open with a metallic snap. An officer from Internal Affairs, summoned by her call, stepped forward from the growing perimeter of uniforms that had rushed into the mall. He removed the steel from her wrists like peeling away the last lie. Captain Williams flexed her hands once, slow, deliberate, then turned to face the very crowd that had refused to look away. Every phone was raised, every breath held. She lifted her chin, her voice steady but resonant, the kind that carried without force. They thought silence was weakness. They thought profiling was policy. They thought dignity could be cuffed. She paused, letting the words settle into every corner of the atrium. "But you stood, you recorded, you spoke, and because of that, justice didn't wait for tomorrow. It happened here, now." Applause detonated. Some cheered, some wept. A young woman whispered through tears. Finally, someone showed them. The suspended sergeant and his partner stood off to the side, badges useless, radios dead, eyes hollow. The manager sagged under the weight of his own words, the phrase "her kind" now etched into evidence for the world. Williams turned once more to the crowd, and though she didn't smile, her presence filled the space with something stronger. "Remember this, Justice doesn't need anger. It only needs the truth and the courage to stand with it. Her phone chimed again, command's voice cutting clean. Captain, incident logged, full record archived, disciplinary proceedings initiated. You are clear. She nodded once, then slid the device back into her pocket. The chant began again, louder, surging like a tide. Justice now, justice now! Children clapped with their parents. Teenagers shouted into their streams. Strangers embraced, united not by purchase but by principle. And in the center of it all, Captain Williams stood free, shoulders unbowed, the living proof that dignity cannot be stolen, profiled, or silenced. The mall lights gleamed off polished tile, reflecting not chains but freedom. As she walked toward the exit, people stepped aside, not in fear, but in respect. Phones dropped lower. Applause followed her stride. She didn't look back at the ones who tried to erase her. She didn't need to. Their downfall was already sealed, carved into digital memory, carried by thousands of witnesses. Her final words lingered in the air, spoken not as command but as testament. I don't need to film justice. I am its result. The roar of the crowd followed her out into the sunlight, and with that, the story closed not as tragedy, but as triumph.